helping people find the way, talking about Jesus every day.
Welcome to Session 2 of Reaching Out the Wayfinder's Way.
Hello again. You should have made good progress by now with the action plan from the previous session. So what we want you to do right now in your group is tell each other how you've got on, if you haven't already. Share the highs and the lows. Take time to encourage one another and celebrate the good things that God has done. It would be also a good idea to pray with each other. So right now, push pause, and when you're ready to continue, come back and push play. In this session, we're going to be looking at finding out their story.
Three-story evangelism. An effective approach to evangelism consists of three stories: theirs, ours, and God's. So you find out their story, then you take the chance to tell them your story. If they've shown interest, you can tell them God's story. Now let's look at how to find out their story. First, approach people with a loving, respectful attitude. Make sure you really love the person you're talking to. People, they're not just another notch in bed. I got to share the gospel with someone. No, that's totally the wrong attitude. You go there and love to them. As Romans puts it, don't just pretend to love others, really love them. In one area, love is shown by listening to the person you're talking to. As Proverb puts it, listen before you answer. If you don't, you're being stupid and insulting. So love them and show it by listening to them. And then ask questions. Asking questions is a key to effective reaching out to people. Ask questions and then listen. The better you listen, the better you'll come to understand them. Now, here are some possible questions to use. Tell me your God story. When has God shown up in your life? Now, some people tell me that tell me your God story question sounds a bit funny, but I've used it a lot. And it's amazing the stories that people will come out with. There was one lady I asked the question of, and she sort of looked at the floor, looked at the ceiling, and then looked at me and said, if it wasn't for God, I wouldn't be here. And then proceeded to tell me the story of how she'd gone to university. She got depressed. She was feeling suicidal. She was starting to work out how she was going to kill herself. And then she ran into some Christians who told her about Jesus and what he'd done for her. And that whole story transformed her life, and she was totally changed. Now, no one around her at that stage knew that part of her life. No one had heard it until I asked the question, tell me your God story. Another question you can ask is, have you ever felt close to God? Some people have particular experiences where they have had a feeling of God being really close to them. Or, alternative approach, do you feel far from God or close to God? I do it like this. I hold my hands up and go, if this is God and this is you, are you close to God or are you far away? And I leave my hands up and let them sort of indicate where they are. And often they'll put themselves in the middle. I think that's because they know they're not close to God, but they don't want to say, oh, I'm far away from God. Follow-up question can be, would you like to be close to God? If they say yes to that, well, obviously, you can start sharing your story with them and then go into God's story. Another question, more general in nature, are you a spiritual person? Some people are into all sorts of different spiritual things, not necessarily Christianity, and you ask that question and they'll happily talk to you about it, and you can find out more about where they're coming from. Another general type question is, do you have a faith of any sort? Now, for a lot of people, they'll talk about maybe back in their childhood they went to Sunday school, or they used to go to church, but they don't now, or, yeah, they really believe, but they haven't found a place to connect. All those things get you a chance to understand them better and find out where they're at. Have you ever thought much about God? Very simple question in one way. I got talking to one guy, he said, oh, I've never thought about it at all, ever. Good chance to start thinking. Tell them your story. Different one. total different tack, but I've used it and had people sort of really get thinking. If you could live your life over again, what would you do differently? You'll be amazed at some of the answers you get to that. And then if you've been talking to them for a bit, you can say, is there something in your life you'd like me to pray about? A simple offer of prayer often helps conversations go in a very spiritual type direction. Then people say, well, what do I do with the atheists? People who say they don't believe in God. I simply ask, well, what led you to believe that God doesn't exist? Then you can hear where they're coming from. For some people, it's an intellectual thing. For other people, it's an emotional thing, some hurt in their background, all sorts of different stuff. You want to find out about people. You want to find their story. You want to know where they're at. That's the whole point of these questions, finding out their story. Now, what we want you to do is, in your group, discuss the questions you've just heard. They're listed in your workbook. Pick at least 3 you feel you'd be comfortable using in a conversation. Mark them in your workbook. Then try and come up with at least one totally new question that you think you could use. Discuss them in your group, trace ideas around, come up with something totally new. Make sure you write that new question down in your workbook.
Welcome back to session 2. For some people, having a conversation with people about spiritual things is easy. For a lot of us, it isn't. If you're not sure how to have a conversation which leads to talking about spiritual things, then you could use this pattern. It's based on the word bless. B stands for body. How are they? How's their physical health? Now, here in New Zealand, it's almost a part of our common greeting. Hi, how are you? And the common reply is either good thanks or fine thanks, and it's all quite superficial. But if we're genuinely interested in them, we really want to know how they are. L stands for labour. How is work, school, however they spend their time? It might be volunteering or it might be hobbies. Currently where we live, nearby, there's a lot of retirees and a lot of them play golf. So we chat to a lot of them about their golf and how it's going. E stands for emotional. How do they genuinely feel about their life? How's it all going for them? S stands for social. How are the relationships in their life? How are they getting on with members of their family? How are things going with their friends, their neighbours, etc.? And the last S stands for spiritual. How is the spiritual side of their lives? Some people say to us, I can do the first 4 parts pretty easily, but I don't know how to bring up spiritual issues. What do I do? This is where those questions we talked about come in. The 3 you marked in your workbook or the one you created yourself. Ask one of those as the conversation flows. Now, it's important to note, this is not a fixed pattern. You can swap the order around. You can leave bits out that don't fit. You can add in something else. For instance, when you ask how they are, you find out that they've had a bit of bad health or they've had an injury, you can ask how they feel about that. And that might lead straight into asking the spiritual question, and you take it from there. Listen carefully to the person you are talking to and listen carefully to the Holy Spirit. You may get prompted to offer to pray for them, or you may feel like telling one of your God stories where God's intervened in a similar situation. These 2 things we'll cover off in sessions that are coming up. But right now, we want you to practice the bless pattern. In pairs, practice having a conversation using the pattern. First, one person uses the pattern to find out more about their partner, then swap it around, and the other person uses the pattern. Discuss what you've learnt and how it feels. These instructions are also in your workbook. So go and see if you can find out something new about the person you're talking to.
I hope you enjoyed practicing the bliss pattern. What we'd like you to do from here is, first, post your new question on our Facebook group so others can use it if they like it. Now, if you don't use Facebook, email it to us at info@thewayfinders.nz. Then practice the questions you think you'll be comfortable with, those 3 you marked, and practice the new one that you came up with. Next, go out and practice the bliss pattern. Now, go easy on yourself. First, do it with other Christians. Maybe someone else in your group that you didn't practice it with already, or just find some other Christians, tell them what you're doing, tell them you're practicing this, and talk to them, take them through. Now, you'll find out some interesting things about people that, you may have known them for years, but you'll still find out interesting stuff by focusing on them, asking questions, and listening. Then, go and practice with family and friends who aren't Christians, but would be prepared to listen to you and just tell them you're practicing. Most people are quite happy to let you practice, and they don't expect you to be perfect then. Then, once you've done it a few times and you're feeling confident, use it with anyone you get a chance to talk to. Just find out their story. In the next session, we're going to show you how to tell your story in a way that means people will understand it and remember it. You'll also learn how to find out their reaction to your story. But right now, we want you to go out and practice finding out their story. See you next time.
Helping people find the way, talking about Jesus every day. Life's so good I've got to share. I'm following Jesus everywhere.